All right, just going to get this started. I didn't realize you were going to pop in right away, so this is good. I saw you waiting there, impatient. Um, Welcome everybody to the live stream. Joe here. Can I just call you Yago because that's how I know you on Twitter, or do you want me to call you? Is it
Yago,
Eden?
that's the name.
Yago.
Yago,
Okay,
Yago.
perfect, perfect. And Yago's here to talk about Bitcoin OS. If you're not familiar with Bitcoin OS at all, it's going to be like in the realm of Bitcoin DeFi, something that we've been talking about really since like inscriptions went live, ordinals, runes, all that went live, the possibility of various tokens related to Bitcoin outside of typical bridges. My audience knows that I've been dabbling in Cardano for a long time. I remember buying ADA on Bittrex exchange in like 2017 when it was like 2 cents, and they had like a surge in users last cycle. And now they're kind of, in my opinion, kind of in need of some footing that will put them on par with some of the bigger narratives going on in the space. Um, I've got like a loose agenda, like I usually do, but like I told you right before we went live, could talk about anything that you think will be interesting related to Bitcoin OS. I know you're also, are you a founder or co-founder of Sovereign? Is that
Yes,
right?
that's right.
Okay, and I'm vaguely familiar with Sovereign, but I guess I've seen stuff on Twitter. I've seen the token sale. I've seen the Discord, and this channel is really from the perspective of the end user, kind of like the retail investor or trader, whatever you want to call it. So, with my non-tech background, let me tell you what Bitcoin OS looks like from the outside looking in, and then we could get into the specifics, and you could dispel all the myths that either I have or maybe some people in the audience have. Um, all right, so from the outside looking in, I use DeFi in various ecosystems, whether it's Solana, ETH, Base, Cosmos. It looks like you guys figured out some type of bridge that doesn't involve a centralized company custodying the tokens, and then there'll be some kind of a wrapped Bitcoin that's backed by actual Bitcoin that's usable in Cardano smart contracts for leverage, for lending, even gas fees. Is that close, or am I missing something that's really important?
So maybe it's worthwhile giving you a bit of background on
Perfect.
where I come from and what I'm trying to do, because I think that will help explain what we're doing.
Okay.
So I've been building in Bitcoin now for close to 14 years, and with
So
me
you're a
there's
Bitcoiner at
a
heart.
um, so what I'm interested in is borderless, uh, censorship resistant digital property rights. I want to be able, for myself and basically for everyone, to be able to participate in a global economy without anyone stopping me. I want to be able to actually own things like and have control over my financial destiny without having to rely on third parties and bailouts and you know
Right.
regulations and what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do. And Bitcoin is very special in that respect in two important ways. One, only Bitcoin really represents a platform for digital property rights. Everything else is a platform for software and for applications and is built like software, right? So it constantly
Right.
upgrades. You have people who control it, they have a direction,
That's
they
right.
choose the direction. What makes something a good platform for property rights is that it is completely reliable and is unmanipulable. There's no one in control, um, except for the person who owns the property, right? And Bitcoin really is the only system that looks like that. Um, and so, I say we've got like hardware and then we invented software, but now we've invented something new with Bitcoin, which is permaware, right? It's written in code, but it's as hard as hardware, and nothing else in crypto really compares. The other thing, and this is maybe even more important, is the reality is that what we're building is is systems that are highly dependent on network effects. Every single blockchain is a network. It's a network of nodes and it's a network of users. Money is a network. Liquidity has network effects. And the one thing that we know about network effects is that they end up being winner takes most. And the truth is that Bitcoin has such a commanding lead and has managed to consistently maintain that completely commanding lead now for 15 years, that something extremely dramatic, like the collapse of Bitcoin, would be necessary for Bitcoin to lose that lead. And so, really, what I'm working on is make is empowering myself, and by extension, really anyone else, by releasing the limitations in Bitcoin and allowing it to fully express the power of its network effects. And I think that because it is the only permaware, and because Bitcoin has the dominant network effects, we already know how the story ends. Bitcoin is going to be the global settlement ledger, and other systems may have use to the degree that they can integrate with Bitcoin.
Okay, it makes sense, and actually that leads into the first part. I don't wanna interrupt, but this is perfect where you're going here. Um,
Yeah, so maybe I should explain sort of what we're doing, and sort of what is the role that BOS plays in this. So BOS stands for Bitcoin OS, the Bitcoin operating system. And what I think everyone who knows even a little bit about Bitcoin knows is that really today it's not a global settlement
no.
ledger, right? And the reason is it's a ledger for only one asset, BTC. And even with BTC, you're extremely limited in what you can do. You're limited in the number of transactions, the throughput, the scalability, the programmability, and you're limited because of all of that in terms of the applications, right? There's no dexes, there's no DAOs, there's no lending platforms, there's nothing. And so really the only thing that you can do with Bitcoin is hoard it. And so Bitcoiners today are kind of like dragons sitting on their pile of gold.
That's
Um,
exactly right.
but for
Yeah.
yeah, but I've been holding and accumulating Bitcoin now for 14 years, and um, time has come, and I expected this, 10, 12 years ago. Time has come for people like me, people like you, really the entire world, to be able to start doing two things. One is putting their BTC to work, and two, putting the Bitcoin
The
network to
network.
work.
Yeah, I always viewed it
Right. So
as more of a
yeah.
network than a token, because if everyone just buys and holds a token and there's no transactions on the network, then there's no reason for the security and the hash rate and all these expensive miners to operate. So right now you're already speaking my language here, so I like this so far.
Yeah. So I'll start with the BTC and then we'll talk about the Bitcoin network, right? So BTC. Today, $2 trillion worth of value, the only true digital macro asset, and growing really rapidly, right? It's going to be many, many, many trillions of dollars worth of
Hopefully.
value. And there's this, well, I guarantee it. Nothing has changed, right? The same fundamental analysis that I was able to do 14 years ago, you can do today. And in fact, the evidence is just piled up, right? We have a truly superior system because it actually offers property rights everywhere that are unstoppable. And so that's valuable to the United States
Mhm.
government. It's valuable to the Chinese government. It's valuable to you. It's valuable to me. And it's valuable to everything in between. And if anything, the world is only becoming more uncertain, which means that other kinds of property rights are becoming more uncertain. Other kinds of communication, other kinds of transaction, other kinds of commerce are becoming more uncertain. And so, in fact, as the world becomes more uncertain, as globalization becomes more uncertain, the need for Bitcoin continues to
Mhm.
rise. Um, and so, Bitcoin is able to do what gold is no longer able to do because you can move Bitcoin
Yeah.
like this. And so the minimum threshold for Bitcoin's value is gold's threshold, which is $30 trillion.
Mhm.
And if we add onto that the ability to actually build economic tools onto Bitcoin, which is something you can't do with gold, then the sky's the limit.
All right. This
So
all I agree with
yeah,
pretty much everything you just said to the extent that I understand where you're coming from as retail, right? But Bitcoin OS is not first, right? And you were talking about the importance of being first. So you guys must feel that the way you're going about building Bitcoin OS, that there is some competitive advantage over other ecosystems that have had beyond just wrap Bitcoin on ETH, which is as straightforward and maybe limiting as it gets. You, how is Bitcoin OS going to step out in front of the pack where you have Cosmos, Sui, Solana, Coinbase now realizing, oh, well, we need something more than proof of stake. Bitcoin's right over here. Let me align with Bitcoin as best that I can.
I think that's a very good question, but I would sort of, there are two parts, right? Why don't people use WBTC, and is BOS first? So the reason people won't use WBTC, and they don't, we know this, right? There's like uh, around 40,000 WBTC.
Mm,
It trades at a discount to
mhm,
Bitcoin, and it's not growing. In fact, it's dropping. Why? And the answer is that for the vast majority of people, the reason they hold BTC is they don't want to take risks with their property rights. They want to own, like the secret sauce here is the property rights. And so if I take my BTC and I put it in the hands of BitGo or Justin Sun, I no longer own, I no longer control my
yeah.
BTC. And for if you're very degen, maybe that doesn't matter. But if you are someone who's accumulated a significant position in Bitcoin, and if you are an institution or if you are a custodian, it matters a lot. In fact, it's the only thing that matters. And so that is the reason the WBTC sort of hit a ceiling and hasn't grown since.
Okay. Yeah, and a lot of it, like you to
Um,
your point, not only does it trade at a discount, a lot of it is just sitting in liquidity pools, right? If there was more utility and more similarities with actual Bitcoin, it would not trade at a discount and you would see it moving a lot more, not just sitting in these pools. Is that fair to say?
I don't know about the pools
Mm,
part. So theoretically, you could build any kind of application for
yeah.
WBTC on Ethereum,
Mm,
right? There is a really important question here of scale, right? Remember, this is all about network effects. It's all about liquidity effects. And so if you're not able to achieve, if you sort of hit that ceiling and you're not able to attract the most significant players and the most significant capital, then there is then you just have a constrained economy, and constrained economies are weaker economies. Now, sometimes in crypto we make a fundamental mistake, which is thinking that what really matters is mass
mm,
adoption. Now, mass adoption matters from an ideological perspective. I want everyone to have access to these tools. But from an economic perspective, it doesn't matter almost at all. Bringing the next billion users into crypto would not make a difference to the valuations in crypto. What matters in crypto is bringing the next $1 trillion and the next $1 trillion after that. And so everyone, I think, sort of has this idea, oh, we need mass adoption. But at the same time, they also know really it's sort of like the whales that move the world. And
mm,
that's because economics is not democracy. It's not one man, one vote. It's logarithmic. It's $1, one vote. And those dollars are concentrated. And so the real question is, can we crack open a world of applications and economic effects for BTC, which uh, go to where the risk averse, the people who are interested in wealth preservation, are going to be interested, right? And so what Bitcoin has done that crypto hasn't done is it's cracked that space. And what we're doing with BOS is we're cracking sort of the application space for Bitcoin in the same way. Now, the other thing you said is we're not first.
mhm,
And I think it's important to understand the distinction between everything that's existed up until now, which has been effectively a test net or a proof of concept, and what we're building, which is the ability to actually utilize your BTC without having any intermediary in the middle. And in that respect, we are the first. In fact, it was last year at the main Bitcoin conference where Trump spoke that we on stage for the first time ever gave Bitcoin eyes and a brain to understand applications, programs, and things happening outside of the Bitcoin chain by verifying the first ZK proof on Bitcoin in block 853626. And since then, we have just continued. And actually, this follows 4 years of us publishing work, um, which sort of opened the theoretical a door to being able to do this kind of thing. And since then, building out the operating system, which is now allowing developers, everyone from the Cardano ecosystem to the Litecoin chain to Arbitrum, Ethereum, and ultimately Tron, Sui, BSC, Avalanche, to integrate deeply into Bitcoin and become part of a cohesive, unified network, a single ecosystem, which will be crypto and which will be centered around Bitcoin.
How are end users going to experience access this? What is that going to look like from the user's point of view?
So that's not an easy question to answer because it's going to change everything from the user's perspective, but at the same time will be kind of invisible to the user.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is a good operating system sort of disappears into the background, but lets you do everything that you're doing. So, for example, I have my iPhone here. My iPhone is powered by iOS, but I don't really think about iOS almost
Right.
ever. What iOS is doing, however, in the background is it's allowing all of the applications that are built on the phone, not just to work on the phone, but also to be seamlessly integrated with
Right.
each other. So, for example, when I open my Uber app and I see the little map of the car moving around, what it's actually doing is it's pulling Google Maps directly into my Uber app. It's iOS which is doing the job of allowing one application to be pulled into another application, and then also allowing the wallet application to provide for payments.
Right.
So what the experience will be, let me sort of give you a picture of what the experience is today on a high level, and then I think you'll get a sense for how they and then try and describe some of the things that we will see
Okay.
differently.
Perfect.
So today, if you are in, if you have like a wallet, and every time you go and you connect to a new thing, it's choosing, or you're choosing the chain that you're on,
Mhm.
and you've got your assets on this chain, and if you want to see the assets they have on another chain, you like press another button, and then the assets disappear and new assets arrive, and the whole thing is a fragmented, really a mess of these different islands. Not only that, these islands, for the most part, are what they have on them is little casinos, right? Uh, and the reason the activity in crypto up until now, and part of the reason that crypto has stalled, is because when you are building on ephemeral systems, for systems which feel like software, you're not building um, true economic activity. True economic activity is your savings. That is a very long-term thing. Your pension, that's a very long-term thing.
Mhm.
Your inheritance, that is a very long-term thing. So that's on the individual basis. On the sort of corporate institutional basis, bonds, right? 10-year, 20-year, 30-year bonds, infrastructure projects, real estate, real world assets. All of these things last 10, 20, or 100 years. You can't build them on systems which are constantly changing in the same way that regular software
Mm.
does. So we've been limited to ephemeral things. And what is the ephemeral thing? Gambling, Ponzi,
That's it.
speculation. That is extremely fast
That's it.
paced, right? And so what we've created is a whole bunch of disconnected islands of casinos. And then when people want to go from one casino island to another casino island, they get into a little rowboat, which we call
Mhm.
bridges. And every now and again, these North Korean pirates come and steal the boat and all of the money, and another degen sort of sinks to the bottom of the ocean. And so that is the experience that we have now. It's a confusing mess, which is incapable of producing a truly productive economy. Now, what we're building, because it's based on different principles, and because it is built on the foundation of a system which is designed really to do only one thing, which is digital property rights, immutable, unchangeable forever. Um, what we're building is the ability for all of these different islands to become part of a single unified economy, and to start playing a role where you'll start having smart contracts that are written on Cardano, and smart contracts that are written on Avalanche, and smart contracts that are written on Sway, but that they execute on the Bitcoin
Okay.
network, right? And and they will execute on the Bitcoin network with effectively infinite scale, because all of the complexity is pushed to the sides, but all of the property rights are pushed to the center. And what that also means is that for you as a user now, you will be able to have assets that you completely control, that you know your kids will be able to inherit, and that can interact at the same time with um, applications across all of these different chains. And so ultimately, what it will feel like is a true operating system which will disappear into the background, and effectively the entire internet will be infused with digital property rights, because we will have infinite throughput, and we will have reliable property rights. And so, for 15 years, we've been talking about sort of like the internet of value, and we've been promising the internet of
Mhm.
value. We haven't produced it, and I think we never will. What we are going to produce is the internet with value. Instead of building out an entirely separate internet, we're going to merge Bitcoin, crypto, and the internet into a single unitary system. And that's the technology that we're building.
So I do something on Cardano. Bitcoin OS is going to create some type of parallel execution on Bitcoin so that it's permanent, it's verifiable, but also that's where value is going to live, because Bitcoin as a network, there's more there's more value to what we can do, or what you think we should be doing with the network, than there is in a Bitcoin token on its own. What am I missing from that assessment?
Yeah. So I'm gonna suggest a pretty radical
Okay.
rethink, and I think a lot of the reason that we've sort of built the systems that we have built is because we've been working from fundamentally uh, um, erroneous
Mm,
assumptions or presumptions, right? And a good example of this is that we sometimes call this industry the blockchain industry, right? Now, who wants a blockchain? Literally nobody wants a blockchain, right? What people want is tokens, they want assets, they want gains, they
that's it.
want,
Yep.
you know, yield, they want ownership. Um, so the mistake that we're making is it's as if the diamond mining industry called itself the digging holes in the ground industry. What you would end up with is these massive conferences that you would go to in, I don't know, Dubai or Singapore, and they would have huge booths with, you know, big diggers, and look at the throughput of my
Mhm.
digger, and there would be, companies that specialize in drilling holes between the deep holes in the ground, like, whatever, instead of bridges. So when you and like this permeates the way we think very deeply. So, for example, you
That's how
said,
I think of validators, by the way. They're just digging holes and expending a lot of effort, and almost nothing comes out of that hole. But in proof of stake, they get paid up front anyway. So there's not only, I think retail has unreasonable expectations of tokens and Web3 in general, but the infrastructure hasn't really produced anything worthwhile. Hopefully, almost none of what we see is going to be here in like 3 years, 5 years or so, because it's a bunch of expensive
yeah,
infrastructure passed off as inexpensive because look how much Bitcoin costs to run the network. But eventually, if Bitcoin gets used for more than just hodling Bitcoins, no one's going to care how much it costs to run Bitcoin because there'll be a greater value overall. I kind of see where you're going. I know I interrupted you again, but I kind of see where you're going. But from the retail point of
No,
view,
that's your job. Yeah.
from the retail point of view, the way it is now compared to 4 years ago is people are just sitting there waiting for their tokens to go up because there's almost nothing to do except gamble or chase unsustainable yields with stable coins or something
Yeah.
equivalent. Um, yeah, I mean, you're in the process of
Look, I
tying
mean,
it together for me.
we
Yeah.
all I think we all know what the problems are, right? People will say things like, um, "We've built too much infrastructure," but the reality we haven't built too much infrastructure. We built a lot of infrastructure, but we built the wrong
And it's
infrastructure.
redundant.
Or
A lot
people
of
will,
it's redundant. And if no one's
yeah,
using the original, why would you copy it 15 more times and just put a token with it to get retail to chase the shiny object? And that's what
exactly.
I see. Like most people became skeptical and even cynical over the last 3 years, I would say, because of tokens, which have now detracted from what are we supposed to do with the blockchain in the first place. Bitcoin was like the icebreaker, right? This is a new system, a new kind of network. But now what? We just hold these tokens and we download different wallets and big deal. Like I could gamble on other tokens that I did. It's very weird when you think about it.
Yeah. So look, so one thing is we've been building the wrong infrastructure. We've built too much of the wrong infrastructure, and not enough of the right infrastructure. And when I say we've been building the wrong infrastructure, what we've basically done is we've taken Ethereum and copy pasted it 10,000
Mhm.
times. Solana is effectively paradigmatically the same structure as Ethereum. It does the same thing,
I would agree with
right?
that.
Um,
And the apps have been copied
Sui
also.
does the
I mean,
same.
it's Uniswap,
Yeah,
Aave, and Lido on different blockchains with different names and different consensus mechanisms to an extent.
yeah. And so we've gone and we've created this massive replicate replicated world of isolated fiefdoms. And then the other thing is, like, we all know that crypto is gambling, but we don't. What's important is to, you see a problem is not just to identify the problem, but also to identify the
And
cause
by
of
the
the
way, we
problem.
call it
The
speculation on the
cause,
channel, but I see what you're saying.
no, it's speculation as well, but speculation, speculation. The difference between speculation and gambling is that speculation is is you're speculating on some value being created, and it's not a zero sum game.
Right.
Whereas gambling is you're trying to be the one who sort of buys low and sells high. It's a zero sum game. It's PvP,
Mhm.
right? And and also the house always wins, which is basically the situation that we're currently in. And so, but I think it's really important because frustrating to me. We've all identified the problem, but we haven't asked the question why. Why is everything? Why have we unleashed the forces? Theoretically, we've unleashed the forces of the free market, and what we've ended up with is just sort of like this nihilistic copy pasta of casinos. And the answer is because the infrastructure that we built, because it is impermanent and constantly being forked, is not appropriate for anything permanent. And true economic value is always built on solid foundations of permanence. And so, what we've basically done is we've recreated sort of chaotic environments with no property rights and expected an economy to grow and flourish. And so, that's the central mistake that we've made as an industry.
It worked in the beginning because people bought tokens, right? And tokens kind of represented the runway for these teams to build what they wanted to build. But I feel like nobody, like to your point, nobody was asking for more blockchains. There was a period of time where people were asking for more tokens. Now I think people are not asking for more tokens. I think people started asking for apps, but I don't see the difference between a lot of the apps in Web3 versus Web2. In fact, the Web3 versions of apps are riskier and harder to use and harder to even figure out how to get started, right? Like there's almost no app on your phone
I think
that's not a wallet.
I I actually think that that's overly
It could
pessimistic.
be. It could be.
Despite the fact that despite the fact that I'm a Bitcoiner and supposedly a Bitcoin maxi, and I'm supposed to hate everything that is a Bitcoin. I don't.
Mhm, mhm.
I love the innovation that we've seen in crypto, and we've created truly remarkable things. To give you an example, right? Look at Aave. Look at the lending platforms. The major lending platforms have survived two significant 70+%
And they've
drawdowns
adapted.
without positions going into default, right? The On the other hand, BlockFi, Celsius, FTX, Voyager, and the list goes on, collapsed and took tens of billions of dollars of people's money. What was the difference? The difference was algorithmic risk management and transparency with a set of rules that couldn't be manipulated by a Sam Bankman Fried or a Majinsky. That is a truly that is a jaw dropping. That is a civilization changing innovation. We've created rules based, transparent, predictable financial systems with open access to everyone. That was the promise. All right. So it's not that we haven't innovated and it's not that we haven't built really, really cool and important things, which truly do provide a path to improve the world in deep and fundamental ways. It's just that they haven't propagated to the real economy yet. And the gateway to that real economy runs through Bitcoin.
All right. Can we pivot a little bit to Cardano? It
Sure.
seems like you guys specifically chose to begin this journey, this innovation with Cardano. Can you speak to um, just what was the thought process behind that, and maybe the UTXO feature, why that was such a game changer? Because I feel like Cardano had a lot of users in the last cycle, and now retail's chasing things across blockchains, memes, perps, whatever kind of gambling is going on, speculation going on. Talk from in the context of Cardano. What's the integration look like? Bitcoin OS, Cardano, and Bitcoin itself.
Well, Cardano is going to be one of the first chains that are deeply integrated with Bitcoin. And um, the the reason is basically we're starting with those chains that are most similar to Bitcoin. So we're basically calling it like the UTXO bros, right?
Mm.
Bitcoin, Litecoin, Cardano, Doge. These are systems which are easiest for us to integrate into Bitcoin and into BOS because their architecture is quite similar. And Cardano specifically is really important because it has smart contracts that work with the UTXO system and therefore can work with Bitcoin and Bitcoin issued tokens much more easily than other systems. Ultimately, we expect to integrate everything, but we're going to where it's easy first because that's the smart thing to do. Now, the
What
Cardano,
do you mean by Bitcoin issued tokens? Do you mean runes, BRC20s, or some other token standard?
no, I mean true. Uh, so I think runes and BRC20s were a proof of concept, which
Mhm.
showed that you can use Bitcoin as a general purpose ledger, but none of them are truly fungible tokens. They're effectively like taking an ordinal and chopping it up into little pieces, and so they're
Yeah,
awkward to trade, and they're completely non-programmable. You can't build staking on them. You can't build a DAO. You can't use them in an AMM. You can't. There's nothing you can do with them. They're
right.
little pebbles. We now have the ability to build systems which allow for the programmatic issuance of all kinds of assets on Bitcoin, allowing Bitcoin to truly act as a ledger. And in fact, in the comments, I see that one guy says the gateway to the real economy is stablecoins. So exactly, right? We're going to see a huge growth in the stablecoin environment. And what the world is going to be looking for is a ecosystem where these stablecoins can be issued and can be safe and can be trusted. So we now have the technology which makes it possible to issue Tether, USDC on Bitcoin, to transact with them at scale, and perhaps even more exciting, to create Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, which can provide a way for people to use their Bitcoin collateral without having to sell it, which means that the need to sell Bitcoin is going to go down, and to have truly censorship-resistant stablecoins, again, issued on the Bitcoin network. And so one of the ways that Cardano can integrate with this is not only is it now possible to take your BTC without a bridge to Cardano, but these tokens will also be portable to Cardano, Litecoin, and ultimately all the other major chains. But it also means that smart contracts on Cardano can programmably issue these tokens. So, for example, if someone wanted to create a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin, they could write the code on Cardano, make it transparent and immutable, and it could execute on Bitcoin. If someone wanted to create a DAO or build a business, they can do it on Bitcoin by writing the smart contracts and the covenants on Cardano. And so Bitcoin sort of becomes the Delaware of the world, right? It's where everyone registers their companies, their properties, their assets, and Cardano can become like the London City or the Wall Street, right? The center of finance where the applications and the contracts are created and run.
All right, there's 3 terms that I wanna get out of the way just as an end user. Again, I have no programming background, but I've been in crypto a long time. Bridgeless, trustless, native. Is that really all possible, or are you just pushing the limits of what bridges can do to where you don't have the same risks as a typical bridge? Same thing with the idea of trustless, where, um, I've heard people say, "You know what? There really is no such thing as trustless. You just might be making less assumptions, trusting a different component of the whole process." Can you comment on that from someone who has the tech background?
Yeah, so there are definitely additional trust assumptions, but these trust assumptions are rooted in Bitcoin. So the first step, so I don't know, a good example is, I'm sure you're familiar with ETH, all right? ETH on Ethereum is not programmable. ETH has never, or basically never been in a smart contract. What has been in smart contracts is WETH, right?
Right.
So what is
Right.
WETH? WETH is the programmable version. You basically take ETH, you wrap it in in code, which allows it to become programmable, and now it can interact with all of these applications. For the
Okay.
first time ever, what we've done is we've built the equivalent for Bitcoin, right? So we've created the ability to have BTC become programmable, and we make that possible by having the BTC tied to um, an external set of instructions through ZK proofs, right? So the magic of ZK proofs is that you can create proofs that something is true, that is correct, without having to know all of the details. And the way we're using it is we can take software that is written outside of the chain, so it's highly scalable, create a proof that the entire world can verify that that code was run correctly, and that ZK proof can control how the BTC is spent, moves, etc., turning the BTC itself into programmable. But we've taken this a step further. Because we had to be building for Bitcoin, we had to build for a system which didn't have native programmability, had extreme limitations in terms of data size, and many other limitations. And so we built a system so minimalist that it can work on practically any chain. And what we've done is we've created a third generation um, token, right? The first generation of tokens, BTC, XRP, ETH, they were hard coded into a chain,
Mhm.
completely dependent on that chain and non-programmable. The second generation were tokens like ERC20s, which were generated by a smart contract, tied to that smart contract and tied to a chain, but at least they had programmability. This third generation, which is being introduced for Bitcoin, is called Charms. And what's super cool about it is that the tokens themselves are zk proofs, and so they can live on Bitcoin. But because the token itself is a proof, and sort of the information about and the memory of the token, right, the history of where it's been is effectively stored inside of the token itself. You can write a transaction to Bitcoin saying this token is now on Cardano, and you write the proof to Cardano that this has happened, and now your token is on Cardano. So we can take Bitcoin, make it programmable, and make it portable. Now, the ultimate representation of that Bitcoin is still on Bitcoin, but you're able to interact with systems outside of Bitcoin with this asset. And more importantly, you can do it without a bridge, because you yourself, right, you're not depositing it into a new smart contract, which is going to lock it up and create an IOU. No, you
Right.
yourself, as the person who is transacting, writes the transaction from one chain to another, interacting with the smart contracts on the other chain natively.
Okay. I think for someone like me, it's hard to visualize this, but now, I'm starting to see a little bit of a distinction. Are you familiar with oh my, the protocol on ETH that could wrap tokens in an NFT from other chains? It sounds a little bit like that. Now the name, of course, is slipping my mind, but um, you're calling these charms. So it's like a, ZK proof that acts as the custodian, the typical
No,
gatekeeper of a
so
bridge.
it
No,
doesn't
okay,
it doesn't
one more
act as
time.
the custodian, right? Because it's not that we're sort of locking and minting. It's that the asset itself is the proof, right? And so when you write a proof, or when you interact with that proof with another smart contract or with another chain, it is your asset itself is interacting, not some IOU, not some wrapped version, the asset itself. Now, I know it's hard to conceptualize this because most people haven't seen this because it's totally new, but on a practical basis, let me give you an example. Like uh, today, there's a lot of cross-chain interaction protocols,
Mhm.
bridges, and sort of all kinds of systems. They all depend on the ability to either lock the asset on one chain and mint a new IOU in the other chain.
Right.
And then if you want sort of like the native token, they need liquidity providers in the middle, right? So there's multiple different parties that you need to trust, and there's significant costs and scalability and speed issues. What we're doing is different in that the user themselves, they write the transaction. They're not going through any intermediary, and there's no need for liquidity because it's the token itself which is moving. So it's a much cleaner, much simpler, ultimately, protocol, which can help solve a lot of the um, many problems, which I won't get into now, but the many problems, which are, I think, most people aren't even aware of all of the challenges that developers and sort of traders have to deal with, but that plague the world, where we're constantly creating derivatives of derivatives of derivatives.
Yeah. All right. As soon as this is over, I'm going to ask you to send me some reading material on charms, and I'm going to study it, and I'm going to get it to where I could actually explain it to somebody else. Um, is it okay if we jump to the BOS token? Because you have a live token
Sure.
sale right now. That's kind of a big deal. So um, I'm on the email list. I get emailed. You guys did a round of token sale. Now this is round two, if I'm not mistaken, or it's about to be round two for the token sale. Where will this token live? Who's buying it? What's the purpose of buying it? What does it do for the overall protocol? If you want to run down those main things, so people get an idea of what this token is about.
So the purpose of the BOS token. So first of all, I'll start with what it is. The BOS
Mhm.
token will be a charm. It will exist on Bitcoin,
Okay.
and it will be the first token probably. If it ends up being sort of like, so there's a bunch of projects that are now building charms, but if BOS is the first one with staking, then BOS token will be the first staking token that you can manage entirely on Bitcoin. The purpose of it is twofold. One, it allows you to run a validating node for the system. What will you be validating? You'll be validating ZK proofs, which will allow you to transact. Let me explain something important here. What is the trust assumption of our system? Most systems today have what's known as an honest majority trust assumption. In other words, it's some kind of multisig or federation or validator set, whatever, where
Mhm.
you need 50% or 2/3 to agree on what the correct transaction was. And if they can't, then the system can be censored, or funds could be stolen, or whatever. BOS is different. BOS ultimately is secured by Bitcoin, but it had but we need to verify the proofs off chain, and we need to prove to the chain that we verified them correctly. What this does is it creates a very interesting property. The trust assumption in BOS is not an honest majority, it's a single participant, a single honest participant maintains the integrity of the entire system. We call this one of n, right? What that actually means is that if there is 1,000 people using the system or 10,000 people using the system, and a single one of them, just one, is honest, then the entire system maintains cryptographic integrity. Another way of saying this is that unless everyone in the system is corrupted, the system remains incorruptible, right? So that's a huge leap over honest majority.
That's a lot different.
Now,
And how will that be determined?
determine, what do you
Honesty.
mean? How will, but
How
through the
will it be
proofs.
determined? Okay.
Anyone who cheats, if there's a single, the purpose of the single honest participant is to be able to cryptographically, in other words, mathematically prove cheating. Anyone who cheats the system can be exposed with 100% certainty if there is a single honest validator in the system.
Okay.
Now, what we need to do is we need to do two things. We need to allow people to become that one honest participant for themselves, to because if you do that, then the system for you is trustless. And for the people who are not running their own node, we need the system to still remain trustless. And so what we do is we allow people to stake the BOS token in such a way that if any one of them cheats, they can be punished through the BOS token. And people who are correctly validating can be rewarded. And so we create an economic incentive which can be quite small because it just requires that we need to always maintain a single honest participant. And so what we do is we actually incentivize many hundreds or thousands of honest participants so that you always know that the system is going to maintain its integrity. The second thing is that the system is able to do things that, for example, Bitcoin and Litecoin are not able to do, which is um, um, uh, validate programs. In other words, be programmable. And so it plays a function which is currently missing in these chains, which is that of a gas token. And so the BOS system, um, in order to be able to verify that compute and in order to avoid spam, by necessity needs to charge a fee.
Right.
And so where does that fee go? Where that fee will go is it will be collected in BTC and used to buy and burn BOS.
Okay. That makes sense. Right. All right. How hard is it for somebody? How hard will it be for somebody to run a node? Is it just going to be an app running on the computer, special equipment, mobile
Yeah.
capability?
So we have two kinds of nodes. We have what we call the big boss nodes or the slab nodes. These nodes are sort of like almost industrial, and their goal is to manage many, many thousands of transactions, perform proof of create proofs, maintain a record of smart contracts that developers can write to. And then there's smaller, more personal nodes. These personal nodes are from a security perspective equally powerful. In other words, they have the ability, just like any other node, to stop a corrupt transaction and make sure that your funds are never stolen. But what they don't do is they don't service others. And so there's this two system, right? It's like you're either participating on an industrial basis with what we call SLAM nodes or big boss nodes. SLAM means SLA maintaining. In other words, they maintain the sort of system SLA, and personal nodes, which maintain the security and integrity of the system for you.
All right. And again, for a personal node, will there be special equipment involved, or can this be
No.
done?
For the personal node, our goal is to get it light and small enough that it can run on a phone.
I mean, that would be a huge accomplishment because I thought we would be
We're
seeing.
not there yet. Right now, you
Yeah,
need a PC, but you can run it today on a PC.
yeah. And what about technical know-how? Is there going to be um, some hurdle?
Initially, initially you will need technical know-how.
Okay.
Again, the user friendliness is like 90% of the journey, right? We're in the first 10%, which is making the system
Yeah,
work, and then the rest of our lives are going to be dedicated to making it work nicely and fun and in a way that any grandmother and any 3-year-old can use it.
all right, perfect. And as far as the token sale itself, it's going on right now. Pre-sales in general, the criticism is these lead to distribution issues. You have a few wallets that get a lot of tokens for cheap, and then by the time you know there is any kind of network effect, people are buying in way higher, valuation concerns and all that. Do you have any special design to your token sale that can eliminate some of those worries?
No, I think that design is good. You want people who come in early, sort of, and take an early stake, and ultimately are the ones who build the system and sort of take the chance on a new system early on, and builds the initial network effects when the network effects are smaller and therefore less valuable to be able to get in on a discount. I think that's exactly right.
That's fair. Let me phrase it a little bit differently. Um, what I've seen is the trend, and my audience and myself, we talk about this often with proof of stake tokens specifically in the last, let's say, 2 years. It's a gated token sale. There's early investors getting in at, let's say, a $10 million valuation, and then magically on the day of the public launch, the valuation's $250 million. Even with vesting schedules, if it's a staking token that's earning yield, if I bought for 25 cents and the token's selling for $25, I only need like a 5 to 10% staking yield to get my money back, as retail is taking on almost all the actual risk, right? Um, have there been considerations about that or anything in the design that would make it a little bit more fair to those who come on later? Or maybe is the sale just open to everybody and you find out early and you can get in as if you were a VC?
The goal with the token sale is to be able to distribute tokens to people so that they can begin to use the system. We need the people to be there to support the system early on. This is not a closed sale. This is basically a discount. It's a discounted opportunity for people who already understand the system, want to use the system, and will be there as sort of like the seeds of the system from day one. Um, I'm actually not sure that staking will be available from day one. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
um,
I know you'll
some of
probably
some of some of the system is already on mainnet. Some of the system is on testnet. The staking system is not yet.
okay.
And so there's no guarantee that the staking will be available on day zero, but the nodes will be, the functionality of the system. And so this is, if you want to be part of the journey of building BOS, this is an opportunity that you can do that. Yeah, It's open. It's available to everyone who wants to participate, uh, and and the goal is right. And sort of like what I've been telling people is, if you should not be coming and participating in order to see sick gains. You should participate because you're interested and want to participate in the network.
Right, 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 right. All right. No, fair enough. I appreciate you answering that question. Sometimes getting founders to answer questions about their token, even when it's live, is like pulling teeth. So I've never participated in a pre-sale. I'm in the United States. It's probably really hard for anyone in the United States to get involved legally. Um, is BOS available to American residents or not yet, or not at all? Probably.
Um, I believe that so there's a platform that has been built on the BOS network through which tokens are being made available. I think they have some kind of geofencing for the US because
Yeah.
they, you know, unfortunately,
It's
probably
par
don't
for
want
the
to take
course, it seems.
personal risk for themselves. But I believe that is the current
Yeah.
situation.
No, that I've seen where it's like, well, we don't know the rules, so we're just going to geo block Americans. But it sounds like with recent developments, the administration is currently favoring a lot of, you know, a lot of what's being built in favorable, categories like software, right? So I think that'll be hopefully in the next year or two changing where Americans, I mean, uh, the United States will be the biggest economy and biggest customer base for crypto, I would imagine. Um, I would like to see more things classified as software versus, oh, this is a security just because it has a token. It never made sense, and now the new administration is seems to be operating with some nuance, which is good. I'm trying to think. You kind of answered a lot of my questions in this conversation. I have a couple questions about the future of Bitcoin OS. I know we're barely off the ground, but um, right now retail is kind of attracted to shiny objects, but there are people who are legitimately doing arbitrage, looking for sustainable yields and all that. Do you envision retail and just common users being able to access this better with this kind of interoperable system that you're building versus what's going on now where it's totally PvP. You characterized it perfectly well. Um, what do you see that as a better possibility based on what you're building because of what you're building? Um, if so, what will that look like from the end user's point of view in your imagination, in your mind?
One of the projects that I've been involved in building is Sovereign. Sovereign is the current largest DeFi ecosystem for Bitcoin, and it's not perfect. It still requires sort of multi-sigs and stuff like that. And so a big part of what we're doing with BOS is building the next generation, which will allow systems like Sovereign to be trustless, frictionless, etc. But already in BOS for the last more than 4 years, the best yields in Bitcoin have been available. And they've not been spectacular, but they've been excellent from a Bitcoin perspective. So you've been able to earn between 4 and 4.5% on BTC in Sovereign for years now. And you've also been able to borrow against your Bitcoin at 0% or very, very low interest rates. So you can use Bitcoin as collateral. You can use Bitcoin as collateral in order to buy more Bitcoin, which is a form of Bitcoin yield, or you could just earn a passive yield on your Bitcoin. What we're going to be doing now is allowing projects like that and many others to scale that. And it's not based on rewards or incentives or token. That's based on just the yields that can be produced by a productive use of these assets, which is possible, and we're making more scalable and more available.
Any challenges that you foresee, any hurdles in scaling across various chains? I know that you're starting with Bitcoin. I'm sorry, you're starting with Cardano, has smart contract capability,
Well, we're
UTXO.
starting with Bitcoin, but then we will be integrating Cardano, Litecoin,
Yeah,
and many others. Yeah.
But Litecoin doesn't have smart contracts. So how do you foresee that integration being a little bit different
We're
than what
bringing them to Litecoin.
I've seen one of your tweets? And we're getting off the topic of Cardano now because I've always been interested in Litecoin. Litecoin is really interesting um, because it seemed like Litecoin could solve a lot of early issues with Bitcoin, and then no one pursued those solutions, whether it's micropayments or privacy or whatever the case might be. Um, you have proof of work, but now you're saying smart contract capable. I don't know. I guess what else about Litecoin that people should know? It's been around forever, right? But people don't pay so much attention to it. What else is there about Litecoin in particular that draws your
Look, I mean,
attention?
it's even you say people don't pay a lot of attention to it. It's about an $8 or $10 billion asset. It's
Mm,
it's not insignificant. Um, Recently, a project called LitVM announced that they would be building the first roll-up on
mm,
Litecoin using BOS technology. And so this is going to, and not only that, they're actually building an EVM roll-up to Litecoin. So you'll be able to start seeing stable coins, smart contracts, DAOs, all integrated with Litecoin, and by extension, integrated also with other chains like Bitcoin, Cardano, and ultimately everything. Um, and so, some of these chains, they've got extremely dedicated communities that have been building or interested in them for a decade or more. And I think what we're doing is not just for Bitcoin, but for these other chains, unleashing opportunities and potential that was always latent there, but never had the technology to be able to express itself.
I have a question about ETH, and then I think I'm all tapped out on my end. It sounds like what you're building it seems to be a more modern and a more secure version of ETH and all the L2s and bridges into Avalanche and Solana, Cosmos, whatever. Um, where do you see ETH in the next couple of years then? Because it sounds like if I have the option between ETH and all of its hangups and the L2s, which are basically like just multi-sigs in some cases, versus this seamless, interoperable, secure, somewhat trustless Bitcoin software. Where do you, what's going to happen? ETH is going to have to either get on board or go away. It sounds like. Sounds like you don't even care what happens to ETH, to be honest.
I think we all owe a great debt to ETH. Ethereum paved the way for many, many, many things.
Mm,
Aave is a huge innovation. MakerDAO was a huge innovation. Uniswap was a huge innovation. These are nothing to sneeze at, and they remain important to this day. That said, Ethereum itself, while it created many, many years ago, I said to someone, I think Ethereum is going to end up being basically a testnet for Bitcoin. And I think that is
mm,
true.
jeez.
Ethereum was a shortcut. It was designed with technology that was available at the time, but that we knew even back then, 10 years ago, was not fundamentally sound, would not scale. Um, and I think there were also a lot of bad ideas thrown in with the good ideas, just to be different, right? They had to differentiate themselves from Bitcoin. Like the fact that from the very beginning, Ethereum has constantly been in a race to completely reinvent itself every 6 months to a year. So, um, my sense is that Ethereum isn't going to go anywhere. Ethereum is a very important ecosystem, is going to continue to be an important ecosystem, but on a relative basis, right? You can already see it. Bitcoin has been surging. The amount of developers coming to Bitcoin has been massively growing. The amount of excitement around Bitcoin has been massively growing. The network effects, the general degree of acceptance, the integration with TradFi, Bitcoin, all lights are green, and Ethereum is stuck in traffic. And I
Mm,
think that is uh, likely to be the story of the next decade.
mm. All right. Not good news for the ETH bulls like myself. For now, it's the liquidity hub. So there's nothing even Solana can do about that. It's going to be definitely benefiting from a lot of the regulations, but in terms of practicality and uses, what you've described here is more along the lines what I can see my parents using without even knowing that they're using it. The same way, my grandmother, she's 90, she uses her iPad, she uses Facebook. She has no idea how Facebook connects the internet. She has no idea how she's able to upload pictures from a different app into Facebook. All she knows is that she could talk to whoever she wants on Facebook, right? And I think that Web3 has to get to that point, but the undercarriage can't be exposed every step of the way. And a lot of these pain points, security issues, like you said, the North Korean pirates come in and kind of pay themselves out of some of these systems from time to time. What you described, it's our first conversation about this, but now you've triggered what's going to be like a series of deep dives for me. So I appreciate you laying this all out here and just being so informative for me and the audience as well. I really appreciate it, man.
I really appreciate the time that you've given and the thoughtful questions and conversation we've had.
No, forgive all the questions that I'm going to bombard you with the next couple of weeks, couple months as I look further into this. Charms, the ZK proofs, the integrations between seemingly unrelated blockchains, Bitcoin, Cardano, Litecoin, Doge by extension, right? So, yep, giving me a lot to think about here. Thanks so much, and I wish you great luck in your token sale and the testing and the upcoming launches that you're going to be dealing with.
Thank you very much, Joe.
All right, take it easy. All right. Curious what you thought about that. That did not go the way that I thought it was going to go. Um, I've interviewed, I don't know, probably let's say 40 or 50 builders in the crypto space, some of them working on NFTs, some of them working on apps, some of them working on L1s, some of them working on various, you know, infrastructure components. And you don't often get somebody that can lay a linear explanation of what they're building, why it's needed, how it's going to be used, and also where the token fits in, right? A lot of times the token is just, hey, we're fundraising, but don't tell anyone that. We'll just put some pages in the white paper, make it look official. Here's a token, everybody. Stake. And then people are like, okay, I'm staking. Now what? Well, in 2 years, we're gonna have some apps, and then you could earn yield. Up until this point, 90% of what's out there, you go down the CoinGecko list, it doesn't make any sense at all, right? So BitcoinOS software, right? Software that is going to, in his words, hide away a lot of the infrastructure that people are having pain points with. You're going to have smart contracts on Cardano, integrations with ZK proofs, um, Bitcoin, and being able to leverage Bitcoin's qualities, right? It's security, it's verifiable property and permanence. So there you go. I appreciate everybody who is in the chat and everybody who's watching on X. Next time, why don't you come over to YouTube where all the fun is at and the chat is at. But yeah, thanks so much, man. I would never do this if there wasn't people that would benefit from it and look for more on this. I'm going to start following this a lot closer than I've been. And that's just how it is. How I roll. I'm looking for stuff that makes sense. What he laid out there, even though I'm not an expert, it seems to there seems to be a glaring hole for it. And I even agreed with his assessment with runes, inscriptions, ordinals. You can't really do much with them. It was just like, here, we can do this. Now builders build some stuff around these token developments, these token standards on Bitcoin. Well, that's it. Have a good one. Thanks for joining this midweek live stream, and yeah, just be careful out there. There's North Korean pirates coming to take all your crypto, right?